Today's live stream topic is about what is my spiritual level, and it will be also your questions. So for 30 minutes I will share some points, and then the remaining 30 minutes you can ask your questions about this topic. So actually some of you are maybe practicing spirituality or has thought to do some spiritual practice, and whether that thought came to our mind, where I stand in my spiritual journey, or what is my spiritual level. And in fact, actually, we have a login facility where we receive questions as well as live chat. So we receive around 1,000 questions per month. And the most question asked is actually people asking, what is my spiritual level? And in MAV, it is a Maharishi University of Spirituality and SSRF, that I share Spiritual Science Research Foundation. We have done a lot of research in regards to the spiritual level. And in this session, we will also show you a table of what is the spiritual level of the population worldwide. As well, also we will share with you some spiritual experience in relation to some past, so we can understand a little bit more, and also how we can actually grow spiritually and reach a higher level. So in SSRF, we use actually a scale or a term called the spiritual level to describe actually the spiritual maturity or spiritual capacity of a person. And this actually is similar to the scale that reflects the spiritual growth. And it gives us some understanding where actually we stand in our spiritual journey. But what is more important here is when it comes to spiritual level, when we reach a higher level, is actually to be able to experience the God principles, or we can say the God principle in oneself, the God principle in others, as well as the God principle in the creation around us. And in regards to spiritual level, it has many factors how we can understand or measure, we can say, the spiritual level. So it can be the amount of ego the person have, the spiritual, we can say the devotion of God the person have, whether the person is doing spiritual practice as per the six basic principle. It can be, and also another important aspect is the previous birth, whether the person has done spiritual practice in previous birth. Or also important also the spiritual level the person is born at. And also another important aspect to understand about the spiritual level is the proportions of merits and demerits. In a way, the give and take account, what merits and demerits we have. And also how many quality or defect a person have. And then you can see there are many factors that encompass or determine a spiritual level of a person. And for many, it may be different factors. And SSRF use also a scale from 0 to 100% to indicate in the spiritual level. So 0 will explain to a non-animate object, while 100% will actually be the ultimate or the pinnacle in the spiritual growth of a person, that is in a way what we call God realizations, or being also one with God. So these questions that sometimes you may have asked, and many have asked also, how can we come with this percentage? And some of you may have wondered also, no? But in fact, there is nothing new in regard to this percentage, because in spiritual terminology, also the desire for God is also described as low desire, medium, high, or even intense desire for God. And this is just converted into, in a way, percentages as 20%, 50%, 70%. And since we can say the spiritual level is a spiritual phenomenon, it cannot be measured with a physical device or biofeedback device, or understood intellectually. It can just be accurately perceived only, we can say, with an advanced sixth sense of a sense from a higher order. Of course, with biofeedback device, it can give some, we can say, small understanding, or intellectually also some small understanding of a person are or behave. But again, that is just a tip of the icebergs of what actually really happened from the spiritual or subtle dimension. So the main question is actually, how can I know my spiritual level? And usually most of the time, a seeker on a spiritual path will not be able to know what is a spiritual level. So now, dear seeker, I would like to show you a picture or an image that shows you the different step in our spiritual journey, or we can say a milestone all the way to God realization. And as you can see, what we did, we just to understand how it is in a way also milestone. Now we have milestone in the modern education. So just to in a way understand in comparison what are the spiritual milestone. And you can see somebody with that 55% spiritual level at that time become a disciple, and that is a important milestone. We will share also after, this is not here in the image, but when we reach 60%, also this is another important milestone. After that, I will explain in more detail from each level how to understand practically where we stand. And then you can see also from 70 to 80% that are also, we can say, important milestones. So just to go back to explain it in a way a bit detailed, to understand more at intellectual level how to understand where we may stand in our spiritual journey. So just to understand at 20% spiritual level, either God has no place at all in somebody's life. The person is not even interested or believe in God. They are just focused into only material gain, and there is no spiritual practice at all. Or if people even go to place of worship, it's maybe because of some following some customs. And what happened at a 30% spiritual level, a person will have some belief in God or some higher power. So some belief is there that there may be something much more. And there are some curiosity about spirituality. So person usually start reading books or start looking at spiritual videos also. Or some people may feel to go to pilgrimage of place of worship. This is what can happen at, we can say, 30% spiritual level. And at 40% spiritual level, then the person start to get more interested in spirituality and start spending more time or spending more of their free time to try to put even some things into practice. Usually the person start to be more, we can say, single-minded in this regards to spirituality. So start to, in a way, give more time, and even by doing or by thinking also. At 50% spiritual level, one is able, in a way, to go to some extent, sometime beyond religion, and able to understand more in principle in regards to spirituality. And this is also an important step. Why? Because at that time, the person is halfway to God realizations. And one starts spending much more, we can say, time, resources towards spirituality. And half time also, of course, is toward worldly life, but slowly the worldly ambition start to reduce. And at 60% spiritual level, at that time, one person starts sacrificing, we can say, much more time, energy, and wealth in regards to spiritual growth. So their intention now is mainly in the focus on how to grow spiritually. And at that time, they are not interested in worldly achievement, or the worldly achievement are greatly reduced. And usually at that time, the dedication to spend more time to do spiritual practice. And the important milestone at the spiritual level is the seeker is also liberated from the cycle of birth and death. And another important step is at 70% spiritual level is when the person reach sainthood. And at that time their mind are dissolved. That means that they merge with the universal mind of God. So they may actually get spiritual knowledge. And sense are devoid of attachment, worldly attachment, as well of emotions. And this after there are continuations, of course, of one progress spiritually further and further towards God realization. So if you have any question about what I shared so far, about the different level, you can ask your questions. Of course, see, here we are explaining in general, no, as per the different level, but of course it will depend of different person at different stage, because we have seen about how to calculate spiritual levels. There are so many factors that contribute. Now I would like to show you some interesting tables of a spiritual level of the world population. So we can display now for you to see the table, and this is as per the world population in 2016. And as you can see, 63% of the world population is actually between 20 to 29%. And in this branch of 20 to 29, most of these people don't believe in God, or we are not interested at all in spirituality. That is more than 63% of the world population. And we can see that 33% of the range between 30 to 39, this is when people actually start having some belief to God or higher power to some extent, and start to look to some extent. So that means you can see that 99% of the world, we can say 96% of the world population actually, it's actually at a lower level and are either not interested or just slowly interested about spirituality. And you can see for the other spiritual level, such as above 50%, then it is so negligible that even it cannot be even put in percentage. Because when you see about 20 in comparison to the world population, that is 7 billion. And just here, we would like to say a note that there are approximately 1,000 saints between the spiritual level of 70 and 100%. But here we only have shown the number of saints or gurus who actually are actively spreading spirituality. So if you have also question about the spiritual level of world population, you can also ask. Now we will go back to also so something interesting now I would like to share with you is the difference between a spiritual experience in relation to spiritual level. So just wanted to ask how many of you may had spiritual experience, and I felt because of the spiritual experience we get, we have reached some level, or we are at some spiritual level. Because sometimes spiritual experience can be quite powerful, such as we experience bliss or spiritual emotion. We may experience sometimes oneness with everything, or love for others. Or it can be a vision where we are able to see something different. And that can be sometimes quite impressing, and we feel at that time, oh, I must be at a specific level, or I must have now reached a different level. And just here, what we want to explain is what is the difference between a spiritual experience and a spiritual state. See, a spiritual experience is in a way a glimpse given by God to encourage us to continue our spiritual journey. But here what happens, the duration of the spiritual experience can be of few seconds, can be of 1 minute, 1 hour, but it lasts only for some time, and then after that we go down to our normal state. And we go back in a way to this cycle of happiness and unhappiness. As comparison to a state or spiritual state, it means actually the permanent state, experiencing that state all the time. So like sense, we are in a way in a state of bliss all the time. So actually they don't go down. They don't go down to the cycle of happiness and unhappiness. So this is what is important, because the spiritual level will be more in connotation or corresponding more with a state, not with spiritual experience. Sometimes different type of spiritual experience can indicate the effort we are making, show us also that we are growing spiritually. But the important is to understand that the state is much more important. If you have also questions about this point, because it is important, you can also share in the chat. Or if some of you had different type of experience in these regards. Now we would like also to explain about spiritual state in corresponding to a level in regards to a specific path, called the path of chanting, that's been repeating God's name. So what happens is, when practice chanting, that means repeating God's name, at 40% spiritual level, what happens? The chant is not automatic. It is a bit difficult to repeat. It goes off and on. It is in a way effortful. And that is called also vicary mode of speech. It is one type of speech. And also chanting aloud is also part of the vicary mode of speech. And when we reach when a person reach a spiritual level of 60%, at that time chant will be automatic from inside. And especially the person is able to mix breathing and chanting automatically. And that is called madhyama mode of speech. Just to understand again, this is more in relation when the person just focus on that path. Or as well, this is sometimes also what we may experience. We may experience in some day where chanting is very easy, and some day it is more difficult. But just to understand a goal, here is the same thing, that the chanting become effortless, means all the time. And at 70% spiritual level, the one is able to hear the chant from inside, and that is called pasyanti mode of speech. And at 100%, actually, it is called para mode of speech, is becoming actually one with the chant, and experiencing only constant bliss associated with chanting. So just why we wanted to give is just to give you some understanding as per different paths, what can be the different degree of experience and put into practice. So another point also is how much importance should we give to the spiritual level. So in a way it is important also. Why? Because it helps us to drive also, to understand where we stand, not to live in illusion, whether we may feel, oh, I'm not good or I'm high. So ultimately it is important to understand where we stand, because when we understand where we stand, then we are able to understand where we need to go further. So just to give an example, if let's say we're at 50% spiritual level, and if we feel satisfied, oh, now I'm at 50%, then what happened? Our effort become less. Then the spiritual level will become less. It will reduce also, because in spirituality, spiritual level is never achieved until we reach a 90% spiritual level. That means below 90%, the spiritual level can decline easily. Why? Because there are so many contributing factors, such as quality, defect, ego, efforts, spiritual practice. So if ego develop, at that time spiritual level can decline also. I'm now at that level. So automatically that will bring our level down. And just to understand also is, when we start to go towards a journey, we don't stop until we reach actually the final destination. And the main point to understand, as I shared before, what is the main important point to understand where we need to go or where we stand is how much more I need to progress, not how much I have achieved or where I am. Because like that, if we keep thinking in our mind how much more I need to progress, then we have a secure change to continue making progress. And this aspect is how to grow or how to grow spiritually. So ultimately in spirituality, there is no secret. We have to put into practice. It is not about theory. More important is about practice only. And to grow higher and higher, we need to keep on doing spiritual practice as per the universal basic principle of spirituality. And one of these steps that is easier to do is chanting the name of God. It is actually an ancient practice from India, and also we recommend to repeat this divine chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. That is actually an ancient Sanskrit name, and it means that I bow to the divine sustenance principle that is present everywhere. Because actually the different name of God are associated to different principle. So we can always chant. We can start chanting few minutes per day, half an hour per day. Ultimately, we can also chant during random activity because there is no limitation of time and space. Ultimately, God is everywhere, so we can chant anywhere also. But when somebody is new, if some of you are new, is how to start stepwise. So initially we can sit for a few minutes, then repeat in mind for a few minutes. If we cannot, then we can repeat aloud also. And after we can start doing when we walk, when we cook, when we commute also. Because at that time you may observe that most of the time when we do random activity, our mind is active with unnecessary thought. And at that time we can replace with that practice of repeating God's name. Why? Because it really helps to make our mind stable, and it helps us also to grow spiritually. So what we can do also now, we can play the divine chant for 3 minutes. So I will ask you to close your eyes. We will play the divine chant in the background. You can just either listen to it or you can repeat in mind. And after I will ask you to open your eyes, and you can also write your experience if you felt something. And after we can go through your questions. So dear seeker, we can close your eyes and I will play the divine chant.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Okay, dear seekers, you can
Om
open
Namo.
eyes and just try to see how you feel from inside. I know 3 minutes is a bit short, but if you feel some difference, don't hesitate to write on the chat. I think it is nice that we have some questions. Also, there are some spiritual experience. I think some comments like from Yogamaya Dasi. You said that I have had a spiritual experience where I lost all body awareness and felt one with God, and also received guidance from God in a state of how to progress spiritually. So Yogamaya, it is nice that we have that experience where we lose body awareness or we lose time awareness. Just wanted to say about receiving guidance of how to progress spiritually. It is always important to check also with someone, because to make sure to know exactly whether the guidance comes from God, because negative energy can also go and give incorrect guidance. So it is always better to check whether what type of guidance I'm getting in a different state, just not to go in the wrong directions. But again, Yogamaya, it's a good experience, but just always remember the difference between spiritual experience and a state that we should ultimately, we want to remain always in that state. From Anastasia, this is also from Anastasia Philippe, you had a lot of glimpses during Vipassana, I recommend. Anastasia, is good to have, that means you had many spiritual experience, and remember why God is giving us spiritual experience, is that means that we can grow further. We have that potential to, if we do spiritual practice, to get more and more of a higher spiritual level experience. But ultimately, in spirituality, we should always try to go to the next stage in our spiritual practice. Just to say about what you felt about chanting, I think few of you say, that is from A1, you said you felt more calm and still my inner space after the chant. Okay. From Vesna, you felt more peace. And from Shrutika Garud, you feel no thoughts. Okay, from Petra, you feeling calm and some peacefulness. That's okay. Okay, what we will do now, we will also go to your questions now. Many of you ask nice questions, so I will go one by one. So there is a few questions from Petra. You said, in which way do the merits and demerits of a person influence his or her spiritual level? So Petra, actually, there is one important point, is what we call mukti, that is liberation. It is actually when a person doesn't have any more give and take account in this birth, as well as we can say what we call sanchit prarabdha, that is the accumulated account of all our lives. Because see, we are born again and again for two reasons. We are born to go through destiny, and the second is to make spiritual progress. So most of the time also, this is point is when the person is born again. Ultimately, example, the person may be born at 50% spiritual level. But because the person is born again and has destiny to undergo, usually the person drops spiritually by 10% or even further. So in a way, the merits and demerits affect our spiritual level. Another question you have is, can you elaborate a bit? It is about that question. After the other question, does it make any sense to speak about spirituality with a person below 30%? See, Petra, ultimately everyone has a God principle. So somebody who is not interested in God at all, if sometimes it's just going to waste our time, if the person may be asking question, we can always tell them. We can always, because at somebody who is maybe close to 40%, there may be some curiosity. Maybe they may not have belief in God, but they may have curiosity. So at that time we can just say, oh look, maybe are you interested in spiritual practice? But if the person says they are not interested, then at that time there is no need to try to, in a way, convince a person. As another question also from Petra, does it mean whenever our state is less positive due to increased distress, for instance, then this time our spiritual level has dropped? And will it rise again where our state of mind improved? So actually, Petra, in regards to some person who may be affected by negative energy. So we have some seekers who, even though they're affected by negative energy, they actually have some good spiritual level. And again, see, when it comes to distress affecting a person, our mind may fluctuate. So some days the person will be in a positive state of mind because distress is not there. And some days experiencing more distress. But to understand also that what spiritual level is actually, is not just by one day, one situation. It is in average how we are. And spirituality is beyond mind, so it is more what is inside the person that will actually determine the spiritual level, not so much sometime if the person is affected by negative energy. But what negative energy can do is, because they can block the effort of the seeker, and due to that, the person, because they do less effort, then the spiritual level can go down. I hope it is more clear to you now, Petra. There is another question from Anastasia Philip. Did the spiritual level of the world population change from 2016 to 2020? And I think a lot of more people woke up after 2016. So actually, Anastasia, that is correct, especially after the COVID, no? Since the COVID started in beginning of the year, there is more an awakening. So definitely more people are now, in a way, growing, probably putting into practice. But what we have seen now, most of people were at 20-30%. For them to grow or awaken may be rare. But somebody who's maybe at 40% spiritual level, at that time, because of the current situation, their spiritual practice may start to get awakened. So they may feel the need to, in a way, do spiritual practice. So hopefully, yes, that is actually the aim, and this is in a way what we want, that everyone should practice spirituality. And most of the time will come people will start, probably will have potential to grow spiritually, maybe start doing more spiritual practice, and later on we will go to an era that will be more positive, where actually much more people will start practicing spirituality, and that will change the atmosphere of what we live in the present time. There's another question from Priyanka Turnam. How to go to the next stage in spirituality? I can currently understand Bhagavad Gita and Yoga Sutras. So Priyanka, it is nice that you are already you are reading about Bhagavad Gita. Just wanted to say that to try to put things into practice now, what is actually in our daily life. So one is chanting God's name, because God's name can be done anywhere, anytime. So it can be done during many different type of activity. So this is one easy step to start with, or to increase your spiritual practice. And after, of course, there are more deeper when we start to understand more our mind can affect us, then to work on overcoming different defects within us. It can be laziness, it can be anger, it can be worry, fear. So that help us to, when we start overcoming such defect, then our mind become more and more stable. And also one important aspect in spiritual practice and spiritual level is stability. There is another question from Sarika Nikam. At present, I am doing spiritual practice and felt calm and blissful. But how can I know my spiritual level, whether it's okay or going to go down? Mostly full moon and half moon, I found some percentage defect increasing, which one I am working. At that time, what about spiritual level if it goes down? Sarika Kamno, I share already that, see, during new moon, full moon, the negative vibration increase. No? So most of the time, our mind become more unstable. But that doesn't reflect that actually at that time our spiritual level will go down. Because again, our spiritual level is more an average. How we are, it's like calculating 364 days now of the year. So if we took 2 times a few days to calculate, so actually it is more the average of how is our spiritual practice throughout the year. Whether we feel sometimes calm or blissful in spirituality, see if we may reach a spiritual level of 50%. So at that time, what happens? We feel calm, we feel nice. Life is okay around us. There is no bad problem. So we are able to feel calm. But actually the true level is when there is difficulty around and we are able to remain in the same calmness. So more important, Sarika, is where we stand is one, whether we feel calm and blissful, but there is much more to experience. From spiritual emotion, initially what happened, we may experience 1%, or bliss, we may just be experience 1%. But if we continue further and further, we can experience bliss or spiritual emotion by 10% intensity. And the duration also, instead of experiencing spiritual emotion 1 time a day or 1 time in 2-3 days, and I will be able to experience spiritual emotion 2 times a day. And the duration will be 2 minutes, 10 minutes. And the intensity will be 2%, 10%. This is what is more important, because the moment we feel satisfied, we go down. See, whenever you get a diploma in any field, whether you become a doctor, you become an engineer, it is a lifetime certificate. But in spirituality, there is no certificate at all. We get certificate of the milestone, no? But ultimately, at any time, God can take back that certificate. So we can always go down. So there is no certainty until we reach the highest level, that is 90%. So in spirituality, it is important not to feel satisfied with one effort or one progress, but always try to feel where I can continue my efforts. There's another question from Narges. What is main spiritual level of politician in the world? So in today's, we have not done research so much about politician spiritual level, but in today's time also what we have seen as politicians mainly are not so much doing spiritual practice. They are more into worldly affairs. So their objective are in a different direction. So most of the times the spiritual level, we can say, may not be, we can say low, because of course they may have qualities, but may not also be of a good level. So they may be average. We don't know. We have not in a way done the research on that. But just to understand that often politicians also have ego, and ego is one of the biggest obstacles in a spiritual level. So if somebody has high ego, then it will bring the persons down, and it will block a person to grow spiritually. There's another question from Atul Bali. I have heard that if someone die with awareness, then it helps in onward journey. Does it affect spiritual level of next life? And can we do something for people who are on deathbed? So Atul, yes, if what happens is when the person is about to die, if they usually chant God's name, at that time, as they are in calm and they are chanting, at that time they may be able to go to the next plane of existence. But if a person actually die with lot of negative thoughts in their mind or thoughts of anger, it can bring down the person. So what we can do for a person with on deaf base is the best is we can tell them to chant if they can, but if they are not able to chant, we can play the audio of the divine chant where they are. So at least the divine positivity will purify the atmosphere where actually they are. There is another question from Kate Kerin. Why is it so much easier to experience the chant when I chant along with you, okay, in the live stream, and not as easily on my own? So actually, Karin, that is a good question. That's why we are having this collective chanting, because when we are chanting collectively, there is a stimulus. So many of us join collectively, so it is easier. And many of us also are present. And also for you, there is stimulus also looking at somebody chanting, listening to the chant. Because there is some level of discipline is there. Time I have to come and sit, I'm chanting, now I'm sitting. So it helps us to focus. Because sometimes when we are alone, then that determination of that focus become less. So that is why we hold almost daily this collective chanting meditation, because it helps to give focus. There is another question from A1. Is it autosuggestion 1, A1 technique, or it is a nickname? So what can we do to reduce ego? So to reduce ego, there is one practice of how to overcome ego, but that is actually not always easy. What we recommend to start is how to overcome first defect of personality. In a way, it is also part of ego. Defect or ego are in a way one in the same, but of course they are of different type. Because when we start working to understand our defect, they are more easy to catch because they are more gross in nature. And it helps also when we start working on, we accept that we have anger, we accept that we have emotionalism or we have insecurity, then automatically it reduces our ego, no? Because we realize we are not perfect. Many times we have ego, we feel I'm good. So that's why working on this process of overcoming defect of personality is one of the first steps, because it helps us to accept where we lack. And then later on, we can start working on the more, we can say, ego thoughts, pride, I know better. So that is something more subtle. So that's why initially we add, if you can join also our satsang, we will paste the link on the chat. We at SSRF offer satsang free of charge. That is a group of meeting online. That is a platform that SSRF offers, where actually seekers come from all over the world and in different languages. So it is this group meeting, it is in 5-6 languages. It is also in different time zones, and you have an advanced seeker who conducts this satsang. And then here you can ask your questions, you can learn about spirituality, and we work also on this process of how to overcome, in a way, defect of personality or ego. Okay, A1, it is not A1 technique, it is to say all is one. It's nice. From Vanya Agraval, can you give us instance of a person having ego obstacle despite being usually good-natured, and how to overcome it? See, Vanya, there are different in regards to some people may be good person, no? But have the feeling that I know better or I'm right. So there may sometimes some people express in word, impose to others. But sometimes some may be quiet by nature, but by mind they feel I'm right, I know better. So that in a way will, even though maybe calm, good, type of thoughts will be harmful for our spiritual progress. Because if we know better from inside, we will not be able to learn from others, And if we don't learn from others, it is difficult to make spiritual progress. There's another question from Alexander DDK. Why do we not need to know our spiritual level? Actually, what happened is in SSRF, no? Actually, we don't say about spiritual level. Only Parampuja Dr. Attavali, that is a source of inspiration of SSRF, he start declaring the spiritual level of the seeker when they reach about 60%. And he said also why I'm declaring the spiritual level. Because at 60%, it's a milestone. The seeker reach in a way quite a good level in spirituality. And at that time, others can start learning from them, from that seeker. And he said this is the only purpose why the spiritual level is disclosed. Not to felicitate the seeker, because at the same time, it can be dangerous, no? When we know our spiritual level, two things can happen. We will feel dejected. Oh, my spiritual level is low. I will stop spiritual practice. Or we will know my spiritual level is good. Then I will reduce my effort. I will not do any type of spiritual practice. That's why at 60%, the spiritual practice is quite established in the person. So at that time, the chance for the person to develop ego can happen, but less. But mainly also, as I wanted to explain also that, see, what happens is we look by gross eyes. So when we look at a person, we judge how they are, how they behave. But we may not be able to understand that that person is actually at 60% spiritual level. Because it is spiritual qualities like devotion to God, different spiritual quality like humility, thinking about others, sacrifice. They may not be visible to gross eyes. So that's why a person may not be able to understand, but when the person knows that that person has reached that level, and at that time, that person may, if he's a seeker, will try to learn from them. So this is actually one of the reasons of SSRF why Parampuja at that time declared the spirituality level only after 60%, not before. If some of you have questions about what I'm answering, if something is not clear or you have further question on it, you can always ask. There's another question from Carlin. What is the spiritual level of evil people? Also, what is my family member are at a lower level? Is this from past lives? So Carlin, see, in regards to evil people, see here, negative energy, we can say, the spiritual level is more in regards to spiritual power or spiritual energy. So some negative energy can have high spiritual power. So they are powerful. They can fight also somebody who is spiritually high. But they will fight in regards to power, not spiritual level. Sorry, if we can put back the question because it got deleted. I'm not able to. The second question that Caroline asked, no? Okay, we will put back the questions. I will first go back to another question from Vesna. How can we balance normal worldly life and spiritual life, or that is God's will? So in a way, see, when we want to balance worldly life and spiritual life, as we shared before, then we can come up to a spiritual level of 50%, where half inclination is towards spirituality and half inclination is toward worldly life. And at that time, we can balance now between the two. But if we want to grow further and further ahead, then we can see, because ultimately we have to give more time. More time is needed to practice spirituality. So after it become a personal decision, no? At that time, the person, when we say a seeker reach 60%, they feel the need to sacrifice time, energy, any resources to practice spirituality. If you can come back to the previous question, because it was not finished, if you can pass back again, is it possible? Not to delete the question. I go back to Caroline. Caroline, you said also, why is that my family members are at lower spiritual level? Is that past life? See, Caroline, also we can't say whether our family member are at a lower spiritual level. What can happen is they can be more destiny. It can be also negative energy. So that's also can affect the person or the family. And we are born in a family because of our give and take account with them. There is another question from, and if we can pass back, the other question was deleted because there were another question to be answered. From Archana Patil, how to develop spirituality in children? In my case, my daughter refused to change the divine name. See, Archana, about when it comes to children, no? We can't force them when they are small. We can't push them to chant. And sometimes it depends of the age. When they are below 5, 6, 7, they are children only. So sometimes if we force them or push them, then what can happen? Then they will may have rejections towards it. So we can try slowly to teach them. After that, when they grow more, we can teach them more because it may help them. But at the same time, we should not have any expectations. It's not because I'm doing spiritual practice that my daughter or my child should do spiritual practice. So it is as per their destiny whether they will do spiritual practice or not. So not to push, we can explain to them, from time to time encourage them, but to push them is not needed. It depends, of course, of the child, because some child sometimes they have inclination towards spirituality. As maybe divine child, at that time they have desire for God, but because negative energy may be affected by negative energy, so some moments they don't want to do spiritual practice. But at that time it may be because negative energy is affecting them. So at that time we can try to encourage them more and more to do spiritual practice, because initially they have expressed themselves that they like spirituality. But if a child never say, I don't like spirituality from beginning and are not interested, we should not try to force them. There is another question from Yogamaya Dasi. Did every person originally have a very high spiritual level? Does the spiritual level reduce over time due to demerits and accruing more destiny and getting more and because it is pasting. I will go back to your questions. From Yogamaya Dasi, did every person originally have a very high spiritual level, but the spiritual level reduce over time due to demerits and accruing more destiny and getting more and more involved in the Maya? It's called the great illusion. And the other question you have is, can being affected or possessed by ghosts reduce one's spiritual level very fast? So initially, yes, everybody in the beginning of the universe was at a very high spiritual level, but slowly, due to getting demerits, the person's spiritual level went down slowly over different million of years. And at the same time also, the person is not doing spiritual practice. So further and further decrease in spiritual level happen. And I think I already shared, Yogamaya, is a person may be affected by negative energy, but what the ghost or the negative energy will do, they may not sometimes able to reduce the spiritual level, but may block the seeker's efforts. So the seeker cannot progress. In some cases, if the seeker, the ghost is able to stop the spirit or is stopping the spiritual practice of the seeker, at that time the spiritual level can definitely go down. So what seeker is fighting to grow, and negative energy is fighting to stop that seeker to grow. But again, to remember that God is more powerful than any negative energy. And there are many seekers who have distress, but because they have intense desire or desire for God, negative energy cannot stop them. Negative energy can trouble them, but cannot stop them. There's another question from Marcel. Isn't it a bit like this? The higher the spiritual level, the lonelier in society. And the loneliness is replaced by the presence of God. So Marcel, actually what happened, we are in worldly life and we are friends, family, we enjoy interactions. When we start going towards spirituality, around 50% or so, what happened? We start feeling not so much interested in worldly interaction, talking to worldly topic. We feel in a bit bored. So we feel also a little bit lonely because at the same time what happened? No? At this level, we are not able to experience the fruit of spiritual practice. We are not able to experience oneness or closeness with others. And later on when we make spiritual progress, what happens? We become one with everyone. You don't feel any loneliness at all. Why? Because God is always with you. And you are able to appreciate everything around you because you see God everywhere. So in the initial stage, it's like moving from one chair, now sitting between two chairs. So this is what can happen at 40, 50 spiritual level. But when we go further and further in spirituality, then we start bearing the fruits and experiencing oneness with everyone. And that is, how can we feel lonely when we experience the whole world is my family? From Dinesh Pandya is another question. Why didn't you explain spiritual level above 50% and up to 100%? Actually, Dinesh, I don't know, maybe if you missed something, we explain about 50%, 60%, 70% also, we explain about it. Maybe you can go back to the video and listen to the point about when we explain about from 20% all the way to 70%. From Melinda, another question from Melinda Rao. When I first time did in distress, I cried. After a few years, I started regular night meditation before sleep. And after 2-3 months, I had out of body experience and I felt it then after almost 2.5 years ago. I again started when my baby went her first day to school, and within a week my chakra opened to throat, and above I saw white light and it left again. Then I did again after 1 year to do meditation without direct guru guidance. See, in regards to Melinda, it is nice that you are actually, what it shows, no, is that you are persevering on different situations you face, different stages in life also with child and all, and distress. You are still persevering and trying. But see, meditation at night, usually we don't recommend because after sunset, especially when it is much later at night, we recommend not to meditate after midnight because at that time negative energy is powerful. So it is better to meditate in morning, early morning. That is called Brahma root. That is the most auspicious time to meditate. So better to meditate during the daytime. But there will be in meditation, or there may be limitations because we have to take care of husband, children, cooking, duty. So there will be limitation to sit in one place. That's whether it was the reason you sat late at night where everybody is asleep and where all duty are over. But actually, if you look, you can chant this ancient technique from India. You can chant anywhere. When you commute, when you pick up children, when you cook, when you clean. At that time, chanting can be done all the time. And chanting is like meditation. See, meditation doesn't mean it's achieving meditation. So actually, when we sit in a position without moving, we try to empty our mind. Then when mind is empty, we achieve meditative state, calmness. It is the same way. Chanting also, we can experience a meditative state in a waking state. Because when there is no thoughts in our mind, at that time we are in a calm state of mind. So actually, meditative state can be achieved through chanting during random activity. So like that, you don't have to sit at night. You can do it. Your spiritual practice can happen during the day, throughout the day. Because what is good, you have desire to do spiritual practice, but you may have limitations. So chanting is an easy way. There's another question from Nachai Bell. As per your level, can you discern a person's spiritual level? In your personal space, do you do any chanting? You are on a higher level. Do you ever notice any higher subtle being? For Nachai is, see, for in my case now, we are understanding. Sometimes we can perceive someone desire, somebody who have desire for God. It is not, we are not putting in it spiritual level, spiritual percentage, but that's experience. The seeker have desire for God, devotion for God. That is something we can perceive. And yes, I'm doing my spiritual practice. I'm also sitting every day, doing chanting, doing activities, sometimes to sit also as spiritually remedy, like meditating for some time. So actually, I'm trying all day to do activity as my spiritual practice. And even this live stream now, I'm speaking to you now, it's also done as my spiritual practice also. And when we say if we perceive subtle beings, what happens is we experience God's presence in a form of experiencing what we call chaitanya, that is called divine consciousness. And from that we experience bliss. See, in spirituality, ultimate in spirituality is experience bliss. Not trying to see colors, not to try to see beings or something else, because it is again something in regard to the spiritual dimension. The highest place where we can go in spirituality is experiencing bliss and remaining in that bliss. That means remaining in communion with God. There is a one that is all in one. Is it possible that a guru can give our spiritual level if we are below 60%, or we must wait for His Holiness Dr. Artavoli to give us, and must be a person in Goa? Okay, so actually all in one, as I shared before, spiritual level is not declared before 60%, because at that time it should not stop somebody's spiritual progress. It is only because it is a milestone. And as that, it doesn't have always has to be, because we have seen some has been when they were in India, and some also were not being in India, but because of different factors, they actually have a good spiritual level. But again, to understand that it is not so much important to know our spiritual level, and I will share my own spiritual experience. In 2011, at that time I was declared at 60%, 62% on January 2011. And in fact, actually, the few months before I was started to experience every day spiritual emotion and bliss. So I could feel in a much better state. I could feel something very different from inside. And when my spiritual level was declared at that time, I started to become self-conscious. I have now at this level. And I could feel that it reduced the joy that I was experiencing from before. Because before there were no thoughts. It's like children, they're not thinking. So I had to work on it, taking auto-suggestions, working on it to overcome that thought. And sometimes I will have prayed to God, God, don't tell me my spiritual level. Why? Because I want to feel you all the time. I want to experience bliss. I don't want to know, because by experience, experiencing bliss or God's presence, that is the best spiritual level we can get. Is okay, all in one, the answer? From Akosh Vashya is another question. I am chanting more my Kula Devi name. It is in India, it is called family deity. Should it will help me to increase my spiritual level? What about my spiritual level? Please guide me. And what is a proper spiritual level to increase the spiritual practice? Okay, Akosh, it is good you are chanting your Kula Devi, your family deity. It is something again. See, in chanting there are ones is quantity. To try to chant more. So initially we chant 10 minutes, 1 hour per day. But here we can chant 2-3 hours. No? So how to increase that effort of instead of just chanting 1 hour per day, you can chant 3-4 hours. After that, you can aim to chant few more hours per day. Then after is we do it random, no? Chanting random. Then how to chant with more quality, more deeper quality. It is something to how to increase to chant this Kula Devi with more faith or more spiritual emotion. But again, chanting is just one step in regards to the other step in spiritual practice. We have also how to overcome defect of personality. There is also attending satsang, group of seekers to learn about spirituality. Otherwise, how I will guide myself? How I will learn? I cannot guide myself in spirituality. So if we want to make progress, we should learn. We should be able to learn from an authority in spirituality. So satsang is one platform like that. It is online and easy to join. And especially seeker, what they experience, because when there is a group of seeker, it is the same phenomena like we do the collective chanting. Automatically there is attraction of divine consciousness. So seeker feel like a boost and they feel charged for the entire week. And then it helps them in their spiritual practice. There's another question from Mitchell Singh. I thought if we reach a certain level in spirituality, we can only move forward from that level, not backwards. Carrying on to next life, I may have it read on SSRF article. Yes, Mitchell, it is correct. There are two aspects here that is important. Is at the time of death, no? So like the example, we are at 50% spiritual level. So when we die at that time, then we will be born again at the same level, 50%. But let's say what happened? The person is at 50% spiritual level. And then during sometimes the person don't do any spiritual practice and start indulging themselves in the wrong activity. At that time the person's spiritual level can go down by 10%. If they do bad deeds, so they can go down, and then if they die at that level, and they will be reborn at that level, at lower level. So one thing is, when we live, our spiritual level can fluctuate, but at the time of death, we will come back with a level where the life ended. I hope it clarify your doubt, Mitchell. We will continue. I don't know if some of you are interested to continue, because we have many more questions. So, and I would like to actually try to answer all your questions. So we will continue for some time. From Travis Wells, how much can a seeker grow each year under God's grace? Can it be 3 to 5% a year? So Travis, that is a good question. So actually, usually what is the rate of spiritual progress when somebody tries to grow? It may be 0.5% per year. But if somebody tries to really grow spiritually or make proper effort following the 6 basic principles, at that time a person can grow up to 1 to 2% per year. And when we get God's grace, that is actually Guru's grace, and that is something we can get Guru's grace when we reach approximately a spiritual level of 55%. And at that time the person can grow from 3 to 5% and even much more than that. But also one important point I would like to say, Travis, is in today's time, Usually the normal rate is quite low, 0.5% per year, or even sometimes even less. But because we live in a very specific time called syndical, that is a period where we go from this difficult time to a new era. At that time, if we do spiritual practice, a person can grow 50 times more. So this is possible to grow. That what I'm saying, 50 times more is 1 year of spiritual practice today is equal to 50 years of spiritual practice. So imagine how progress can be fast. But that is now only, and it will be up to the year and 2023, 2024. So this period is one of the best time to grow fast. But again, if we do spiritual practice as per our own mind, by ourselves, we cannot grow by that speed. To really grow spiritually, we need to listen to somebody who have walked the path, who know about spirituality. Then we are able to understand and we are able to overcome, to reduce defect within us. Ultimately, to grow fast, there are two aspects. Overcoming defect of personality and ego, that is a fast track to grow spiritually. Because ultimately, our mind or ego are the two main obstacles in our spiritual progress. There is another question from Nashiket. Can I know my exact spiritual level? If we know our spiritual level, it will be a motivating for us. It will be great if we know our exact spiritual level. Yes, Nashiket, I think many would like to know the spiritual level, but again, we can always refer to how much effort I'm doing and compare what type of effort I'm doing. Because it initially is what I shared before, no? If we say spiritual level, either we feel dejected or we feel superior. For some, maybe you may feel like, oh, it will help me to know where I am. But ultimately, see, that drive, no, to practice spirituality, spiritual experience. See, when we practice spirituality, God gives us different type of spiritual experience. Then after the higher spiritual experience, we experience bliss, spiritual emotion. And that by itself is a driving force. That is actually what is the real motivation. Because we want to experience that state all the time. I shared before now the difference between spiritual experience and spiritual state. So ultimately we should not strive what is my spiritual level, but we should try to see where is my spiritual state. If I go up, I don't want to go down. I want to remain in that state only. Then we keep making effort because we go back to that state. There is another question from some. How do I know if I am self-realized? I'm doing sadhana under a guru. What will be the experience? See, actually, for somebody who is self-realized, now it is at a very high level that we're becoming almost one with God. So at that time, see, the person is just doing spiritual practice only. They are not doing. The person who is self-realized is not working, is not indulged in any worldly activity. There is no attachment. It is just 100% doing spiritual practice. They don't have any reactions, emotions. They are more in observer stance. And they are in experiencing that the entire world is my family. They feel one with everything. There's another question from Loitaksha Survana. How to increase Isa Shakti, that is energy of will, to do spiritual practice? That is a very good question, Loita, is how to increase that feeling, I want to do spiritual practice or I want to grow spiritually. So actually, see, in spirituality, 80% importance is desire. That is the biggest energy of will. That is a desire for God or desire to grow. So it's how to work on increasing desire. Then automatically, when desire is there, it happens automatically. But we can be disciplined, no? Ultimately, we have to, how to utilize our time, to make a plan. So somewhere at the basic level, we should utilize our time in a better way, structure our day, and then plan in such a way that it becomes a habit. And slowly, that discipline comes, then that drive comes. And we become, when we start experiencing something from the subtle dimension, then we start experiencing something much more, no? And then becomes that driving force, that desire, that I want to be closer to God, I want to reach God. And that becomes a self-drive. And that is very important in spirituality if we want to go to the next stage, to increase desire. There's another question from Sukumar Nandi. I'm really very much lucky as I met you previously in ashram in India. May I have my spiritual level? So Sukumar, in this session we are not telling any spiritual level of a person. I'm also not able to tell the spiritual level, but we can understand of how much we are putting into practice. That is important to understand, that how much I'm putting into practice and what type of spiritual experience we get. Whether we experience spiritual emotion often, we're experiencing bliss often. But again, what is more important in spirituality is to put into practice. I think you are from Bangladesh, no, Sukumar, if I remember. There is from Vikrant Portal. Also, Sam, you would like to know your spiritual level? Sam and Vikrant, ultimately see what is the best certificate. God should give us the spiritual experience. As I shared before, no? When my spiritual level were told, I should not know, because I want to remain in this experience. So the best certificate is God is giving us a spiritual experience or spiritual emotion or bliss. So just to keep doing spiritual practice. Initially, what happens when we practice spirituality, we may work hard, but we may not get much things in return. And it takes some time when we are able to overcome destiny, ego, mind become less. Then we start experiencing the result of spiritual practice. So we should not expect something immediately in return when we practice spirituality. And this is one also important quality in a seeker is perseverance, consistency. It's like somebody who run one time 200 meters and feel he can run in competition and that he has developed like muscular. It takes time, no, to become an athlete. There's another question from Ramesh Bhai. Do we have to sit when chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, or one can do it anytime? Yes, Ramesh, we can do it. Chanting can be done anywhere, anytime, because God is ultimately everywhere. And more we chant, the better we'll get the benefit. There is another question from Ajp. My mind has thoughts and desire which block me chanting Hilin and write PDR. See, Ajit says you are trying to do something, no? But there are specific thoughts in your mind that blocks you. At that time, I don't know if you are aware of this process of overcoming defect of personality. At that time, you can take what we call auto-suggestions. It is framing a particular sentence to overcome. It can be a wrong habit like anger, or it can be to overcome the unnecessary thought. So it can be like, whenever I start having unnecessary thought, I will become aware and I will stop and start chanting. So this can be one type of decision. Whenever I start having unnecessary thought, I will become aware, I will pray or stop and start chanting, and I will focus back on chanting. So we stop our mind. Also, it is one way, or it can be whenever I start thinking of, and you can say what type of thoughts you get. You say, I will become aware and I will focus back on chanting. So like that, we train our mind, and it's a matter of time. If you are able to do this process properly, it's just a matter of time. Then you can overcome those blocks that is blocking you. There's another question from Sumit Singh. I have observed as you increase our spiritual level, the number of problems increase. Why? Actually, it is not so, Sumit. Maybe I will explain a little bit. When we start spiritual practice, two things can happen, or few things can happen. Ultimately, see, we have destiny, no? So what happened initially, we start burning that destiny. Or if negative energy affects the person, or ancestor problem affects the person, when the person starts spiritual practice, at that time the negative energy start in a way reacting or trying to stop the person. We can create different problem or start coming out. Because we are sure now, some people are affected by negative energy. This is what can happen. The negative energy start in a way coming out. Why? Because it cannot tolerate the positivity generated by the spiritual practice. And then we experience other problems. That is actually an important point. So it is not like that because our spiritual level increase, that problem increase. Usually it is other way around. Most of the time seeker, what they experience when they start spiritual practice, so problem become less, or problem are there, but they are able to face it. They are not disturbed so much by the situation. Or if the negative energy start manifesting in the person, they are aware, they are in a way understanding with intellect. That is a good sign. And that is just a matter of time after where they are able to overcome fully the problem. Otherwise, what happens? Negative energy is dormant in the person and affect the person without their knowledge. So actually the person, what happens throughout life, goes through some ups and downs and different type of problems. And there is another question from Sumita. You said, when you start feeling oneness with every man, then again it is part of illusion. Actually, see, again, when there is this experience, when we feel oneness with everything, at that time it is not the illusion, because at that time is oneness with the God principle. Actually, we are looking at that time as a surrounding, and you feel one with them, not as a person or with the thing, but with the God principle. There's another question from Sina Ali Mouradi. I always see 1111 numbers. What is the meaning of these numbers? I don't know what I should do. Okay, Sina, just to see if it keeps repeating, this is something you can always write on our live chat. There is what we call numerology, science of numerology. So if it happens just one time, two times, not to pay attention, but if it happens often, this is something we can ask. So you can always write on our live chat, and we can ask also in India, because there is some science behind it. There's another question from Sarah. How to overcome personality shadow? Even though I'm trying to put them into the light, I feel like it is not working. Can extreme tiredness and bad dream be a sign of spiritual awakening when we are practicing spirituality? So in a way, Sarah, what you are trying to say to overcome personality shadow, if you mean negative entity or negative affecting you, as I time see, it is important to understand that negative energy can affect us for some reason, can be either destiny, or it can be departed ancestors. And at that time, spiritual healing remedy is important. And what I shared before, it is not like it's an awakening to feel tired or having bad dream. It is more that because you are practicing spirituality, the negative energy start reacting and fighting. And it can be in different form. It can be what they do. They reduce the vital energy of the person. So the person wakes up tired with no energy. So if they don't have energy, then they cannot perform spiritual practice. Or they are not able to sleep properly. So they get bad dreams. So sleep is disturbed. So it is one way how negative energy try to stop the person to grow further spiritually. But in a way, fighting negative energy is in a way one progress, because when we overcome the negative energies, then we are able to make fast progress. And we have seekers, because to fight negative energy, no, you have to develop different quality: acceptance, spirit, surrender. So different quality we can develop as a seeker. And at SSRF also we help seeker to fight, because seeker to fight alone negative energy is very difficult. How can we fight ourselves some invisible forces? And that's why we in SSRF provide also different satsang where we explain about it, and we also explain about different self-healing remedy that helps to overcome problem caused by negative energy or ancestral problem. There's another question from Vidya Nitware. Does not forgiving or bearing a grudge hamper our spiritual growth? Yes, of course, Vidya. Not forgiving or in a way keeping a grudge can actually stop us, because in a way we are not able to let go of the past. Some situation has happened, and remember that whatever has happened to us is because of destiny. So if somebody did something to me, there may be some reason. And keeping a grudge is a negative aspect, no? So it's like keeping a heavy load in our mind. So that automatically pulls us down. So we can work on this aspect of how to overcome what we call prejudice or grudge. So this is this aspect of how to work on overcoming personality defect. See, if we have emotionalism, then we will be prone easily to grudge, because we feel hurt, no? When we feel hurt, then we find difficult sometimes to forgive. So it is one good, it's important to let go, forgive, and overcome. But sometimes we may be able to say by intellect, I forgive. But by mind, we are not able to forgive. Why? Because it is impression in the subconscious mind. And that is why in SSRF will help in this process also of how to overcome impression in our subconscious mind. Something that we had due to emotionalism, fear, worry. That help us to free us from unnecessary thought or thought from the past. And then we get free from those thoughts, and then we are able to go to a positive state of mind. And when we are in a positive state of mind, then it is easier to do spiritual practice and to grow spiritually. There is another question from All One. Can we record autosuggestions to make it easier to repeat, or it is required that we chant it ourselves? Actually, All One, this autosuggestion, it is some suggestions that is tailor-made, that we repeat, sometimes 3 sessions or 3 sessions per day, and repeat that sentence 5 times, so that we in a way tell our mind to behave or react in a certain way, in a better way. Like example, whenever I feel to get angry to my wife, I will become aware, I will refrain from speaking and start chanting. So this is an autosuggestions that helps me to overcome anger. So at that time, best is to repeat in mind. So we can write it on a piece of paper, we can memorize by heart, or we can have it on a handy also mobile phone and just read them. But if it helps you, you can listen to it also. There is a difference between listening and repeating. In listening, there is some level of passivity, but repeating, at the time we are more active. So there is more chance for the impression to go in the subconscious mind, and that is the same phenomena as chanting. If we just listen to chanting, we'll get some benefit, 20-30%. But when we repeat chanting, and we get the 100%. So same way with autosuggestions. But in the initial stage, if you feel it help you, it is okay in beginning. There is another question from Sampada Chandelkar. How will one know his or her spiritual level? How can one find out? So I think Sampada, we share in the beginning what ultimately at the stage of what spiritual practice we do, it gives us some intellectual understanding where we may stand. So sometimes we may not be able always to find, unless you are able to meet a real saint of higher level that will tell you where you may stand. But ultimately, the secure way to know spiritual level is by doing spiritual practice. God will tell us from within. No? God will give us by experience of bliss. Experience of bliss or spiritual emotion is a certificate from God, but not experiencing once in a while. When you start experiencing bliss every day, then we feel I'm closer to God. So that is actually what is spiritual level, is how close we are from God. There is another question from Rashhima Daluya. I feel experience of bliss is important and not percentage, because again, isn't it ego when we reach a certain percentage? Actually, it's a good question. I actually just answered it. And see, ultimately, there are two things, Rashim. Yes, that more important is the experience than knowing the spiritual level. As I shared before, when I came to know my spiritual level, ultimately, it did not help me, but I work on it to overcome it. So ultimately, whether we know it or not, sometimes just to know where we stand in our spiritual journey is important. It may not be defined in numbers also, but whether we are able to put things in the next level of practice. Somebody correct us and we get angry. Then we may understand that actually I need to work on my anger. My spiritual level is less, because if I would be a higher level, if somebody correct me, I will not get angry. That is actually also a way to understand where we stand. We don't have reactions. The moment we have reactions to different things, that means that my spiritual level is lacking. Which is one way. One is bliss, and how I'm reacting to different situation. And if I'm not reacting to anything, whatever happened to me, and that means I'm progressing towards God. No, that is better. As another question from Miriana. Why I am sad and cry and I miss God more and more? Is this maybe depression or bliss? So Miriana, there are two aspects. Is if we cry for God, for spiritual emotion, and because we want to experience God or we want to be one with God, that is called spiritual emotion. And that is a good thing. It is not emotions, it is spiritual emotion. So in a way, it is a good aspect that we cry for God, but ultimately what is important in spirituality, we also have to start putting into practice, not only cry for God. We have also to put things into practice. That is more important, because initially we cry for God, but later on it is converted into action of changing ourselves. That should be the drive. There is another question from Ajay Patankar. How to get more benefit of a mantra while working also? Please tell me how to be more strong in brahmacharya. So Ajay Patankar, benefit of mantra while working, we can chant in mind. No? You can, sometimes there is, in the work we do, there is maybe sometime random activity, whereas at time we can chant in mind. Or sometimes when you do sometimes, okay, important work that use a lot of intellect, at that time we may not be able to chant. But again, chanting can be done in many places, no? All the time. And how to be more strong in brahmacharya. Brahmacharya is one way. See, in regards to say ajna, ultimately spiritual practice is important. How to overcome defect of personality, how to overcome ego. Because in spirituality, whatever path we follow, whether you follow this path, or this path, until and unless we don't overcome defect and ego, it is difficult to make spiritual progress. So to become strong in one path, first we should make our base solid. Means our mind should become pure, devoid of anger, emotionalism, judgment, pride, ego. Then whatever path you do, you will become strong in your path. There is another question from Ramesh Bhai. I have read and heard that no mantra should be chanted just like that or without a guru. Is it true? No, actually, see, chanting name of God, no, this divine chant, it can be repeated only. Some people have been given guru mantra also, or mantras. So it's not like it is, it can be repeated in mind. From Jitendra Kumar, overweight and walking slowly 2 years. 2 years regular neuropsychic medicine. And Jitendra, okay, and you have leg pain, body pain, diabetes. See, Jitendra, again, what physical problem we may have, health problem. Most of the time, major problem in your life may be because of destiny. And for that, chanting is an easy way, no? With all the problem you may be having, you can chant in mind. You can try to chant during different activity at home. I think there is another question from Gopala Tumala. How to get the fighting spirit? From childhood onward, I was suppressed by parents, teacher, elder, and friend. Now I am 40 plus and tuned to be humble to everyone and everything. So Gopala, that is a good thing, that how to develop this fighting spirit. And you are still young, and 40 plus is still young. And this aspect of how to overcome, no, whether there is impression from the past have been suppressed. So what is enabling me to have fighting spirit, whether it is laziness, whether it is inferiority complex, or whether it is low self-esteem, it depends. What stop me? And then to work on it, to work on overcoming maybe those defects within self. This process of PDR will help, because when we overcome, when we sometimes feel defeatism, no, because of low self-esteem or insecurity, at that time then we don't have fighting spirit. So how to overcome first those defects, and then it becomes easier to develop fighting spirit. There is a question from Priya Joshi. Is the benefit earned from mantra chanting the same when we say it aloud and when we say it silently in the mind? I think Priya just answered a few questions before, that when we chant in mind, in a way we get maximum benefit than chanting aloud. Chanting aloud sometimes may help us. Why? Because we are not able to concentrate if we have too many thoughts. Because we have too many distracting thoughts that we are not able to chant by mind. At that time we can chant aloud. But if we can chant in mind, it is much better. There's another question from Minaski Gupta. What exactly do you mean by putting into practice? So Minaski, see, we say, I want to do spiritual practice, but I'm just reading books, or I'm just sitting and contemplating. That is not putting into practice. So ultimately, practice is what is, I will start to do something. So one is chanting God's name in mind during activity. So let's say, usually by car, I'm driving and I'm indulging in my own thoughts. At that time, I can make effort not to chant. Or we can contemplate where we have different defects within us and try to work on them. So this is in a way one way, working on overcoming defect or personality. We can study spiritual practice books, or we can say website, to understand different things and try to put them into practice. So let's say we say that looking TV can affect us. At that time we know the knowledge, but we keep watching TV. At that time we are not putting, but if we say, okay, now I will reduce watching TV by 1 hour, so that is putting into practice. I'm just giving an example. So like that, there are different steps, and how much things we do, we know from theory, and how much we actually implement in our action in daily life. That is what we say putting into practice. There is another question from Sonali Kashid. Can negative energy and negative thought reduce our spiritual level? I think, Sonali, we have explained about it, that negative energy can stop us, can stop our efforts. And because the effort stops, then our level can go down. Negative, if the seeker make effort, may have negative thoughts. At that time, the negativity cannot stop the spiritual progress, but they can stop our efforts to put into practice. There's another question from Milinda Rao. I feel very angry if anyone doesn't follow the right path process, or if they accuse or misunderstand me. I feel sorry when I do mistakes, or if someone point out, but I react aggressively. How to overcome? So Melinda, at least you are able to, you feel bad after you actually made a mistake and that you got angry. So I think to work on that anger, expressing anger. So that's why this working on overcoming defect of personality that we share in our online meeting in the specific process, because here the anger is expressed and reactive. So how to work on it to stop yourself? Let's say you start working on which situations you start getting angry or reactive. So let's say whenever start accusing me, or you can say the name, I will become aware. I will refrain from speaking and focus on chanting. This is one form of autosuggestions. But of course here we can help you in our satsang to help you to formulate your own autosuggestion, but it should be tailor-made to you, but help you to write it in such a way that the perspective are positive. And slowly it's a matter of time, that slowly we are not, anger may be there, but we are not expressing. So first is what happened, we have anger, we can't control, even though we know by intellect, no, I should not get angry, but it is stronger. Why? Because the impression in the subconscious mind is stronger, so it's overpower, it overrule the intellect, and we get angry. So this is the first step. And when you work on it, what happens? You may get angry or you will feel hurt, but at that time you will be aware, oh, I should not get angry. Then you are able to stop yourself of expressing, and slowly as you continue further, anger become less, and then you don't get angry. That is the stages how we can grow through this process and overcome different defects such as anger, worry, fear, and it helps many seekers. Okay, dear seeker, we have a little bit more questions. There are still many looking, so we'll continue a few more questions. There's another question from Santosh Pai. While chanting, sometimes I'm feeling something is distracting me or forcing not to chant. Why it is so? So Santosh Pai, it can be two things, that our mind is distracting us and stopping us. So our mind always goes past and future, so giving us to distract us. And sometimes negative energy also may want us to stop to chant. They don't want. Some are experiencing that when they sit for chanting or meditation or try to chant, what happens? They start experiencing negative thoughts or strong distracting thoughts. So that can be negative energy trying to stop us to do spiritual practice. At that time, we should just pray pray and continue chanting. And understand, if we understand by intellect that those thoughts maybe are given by negative, that try to distract me, I will persevere, I will continue to chant. There's another question from Amanita Shen. Is rereading holy books of the birth religion counting for spiritual practice? So, Amamanita, see again, holy books is one aspect, but again is if you already read it, but rereading, whether it will be beneficial. Because what is important in spirituality is to put into practice. Actually, one day, one seeker met a saint, His Holiness Dr. Atavoli, the source of inspiration of SSRF. And he said to him, he said, oh, I read many books on chanting, more than 500 books. But he never practiced chanting. Actually, it is of no use. It's like I will read book on cooking, but never cook. So to see whether to read again, but again, what is more important is how much I'm putting into practice. This is in spirituality what we counting, not how many books I have read, or not how many books I read twice, 3 times, 4 times. More important is to put into practice. I think this is another question is from Travis. How does removing personal defect improve one's spiritual level? Because see, our mind is an obstacle in experiencing the mind and ego. Give us that identification that I am someone, I'm doing something, I'm thinking that way. And I'm not able to experience this God principle within me. So when we overcome different defects, so because our mind is always disturbed, so mind is always full of thoughts. And because mind is always full of thoughts, we are not able to go inside and experience this calmness of the God principle inside. So what we do through meditation is what? Is we close eyes and we try to achieve no thoughts. Because when we achieve no thoughts, we are able to achieve some concentration. And when some concentration happens, we are able to transcend body, mind, and intellect, and we start able to experience something much deeper. So what happens is, but it's not always easy to meditate. Why? Because many times there are some good days, bad days. And if our meditation we are doing for many, many years, and we are able to achieve easier high level of concentration, then if not, what happens? Some days we are not able to do anything. So at that time, that's why when we overcome defect in our mind, like overcoming anger, worry, fear, automatically what happens? There is no thoughts in the mind. We can be in a waking state. There is no thoughts coming from the subconscious mind to the conscious mind. And at that time, the mind is in meditative state of mind. And because the mind is in meditative state of mind, in an awakening state, it is easier to experience the God principle or to do more spiritual practice. And automatically, we are closer to God, no? Okay, dear seekers, I think we have now more than almost 2 hours. We are having this last stream. It's very nice because and some of you also make different comments. Like Carlos, you said, to be honest, I feel a little bit unmotivated knowing that my spiritual level may drop. See, Carlos, it's a one way of thinking negatively because number one, we don't know what is our spiritual level. And just our spiritual level can go up and down. But more important is not so much to focus on that, is to focus if by doing spiritual practice, I will be able to experience God principle. And ultimately what happens now in any field we'll do, there is always ups and downs. When we reach, until we reach 60%, there will be always this ups and downs. But if you continue and persevere in spirituality or spiritual practice, it is for sure one day we will cross that barrier and then there will be no these ups and downs. I will be experiencing bliss only. Okay, dear Sika, it is very nice that many of you came for our live stream tonight and asked many questions. So just wanted to share, we have also, today is Wednesday, so Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, we also have collective chanting meditation sessions. And on Sunday, we also have a workshop. This Sunday will be of 3 hours duration. It is through Zoom, and the workshop is of 2 hours, of 3 hours. The first 2 hours will be about how to learn some self-healing techniques, 5 self-healing techniques that you can do at home, and especially that those techniques is we will actually demonstrate and you will also practice in the workshop. So after that you can do it yourself at home. And the second, it is about research about dance. Can dance actually help me to grow spiritually? And actually the question is yes, dance can help us to grow spiritually, but also dance using biofeedback device, we have seen that also dance can affect our aura. So that is the research that we will present. And this workshop is through donation, so you can give whatever you like or can. It is available to everyone, and we will paste the link. So if you are you would like to go, you can always register. So dear seekers, we always have live stream every Wednesday of that series of question answers of different topics. So keep coming to our website, to our event page, to see what new topic, because we always take different topic that are sometimes not spoken. So dear seeker, you can always also ask questions on our live chat facility. Feel free to ask questions all the time, because this is one of the platform of SSRF, is to help seeker in their spiritual journey. So dear seeker, wishing you all the best. Remember that God is ultimately everywhere, and the best spiritual level is to experience God's presence. So namaskar, and wishing you good spiritual journey.